Good evening, and welcome to tonight's webinar. I'm Dr. Tracy Steady Hardcastle, and I am thrilled to be here with Dr. Laura Varden, our Dean of Students at DNA University. And we are here this evening to talk to you about the intersection between menopause and autoimmune disease. And some people find that autoimmune diseases can feel like they're progressive, and in some cases they are. But then sometimes people have started to notice that when menopause hits, there's a sudden worsening or progression of autoimmune disease or an onset. So we wanted to take a look at the research and take a look at how genetics impact this. And that's what we're going to do for you this evening. Dr. Varden, would you like to say hi before I go over some definitions with our audience this evening?
Well, of course. Thank you so much and welcome everyone. We are so glad that you're joining us here. I'll tell you, I know we talk a lot about menopause and, we've got a lot of webinars, a lot of information, but I'll tell you, it is such an under-discussed topic, and there's so many things that connect menopause and the change of our hormones, of our bodies with health, with so many aspects of health. And so this isn't just another menopause webinar. This is diving in specifically talking about that interconnection of menopause to autoimmune disease. So please stick with us. And, if you're, taking a look and just trying to see, on a replay about, oh, should I listen to this? Absolutely, you should, especially if you yourself or have a loved one that deal with some autoimmune issues or conditions, or you want to make sure not to shift into that type of diseased state. This is definitely one to listen to. Thank you.
So while you're filling out our poll questions, I'll just go over a couple of quick things. So I'm going to define autoimmune disease for you, and many of you may already know this, but just in case, this is when disease if I can speak, it occurs when the immune system mistakenly attacks the body's own healthy cells, tissues, or organs instead of protecting them from harmful invaders like bacteria and viruses. So that's what the immune system is supposed to do. And I would add fungus to that and anything that, we don't want to overwhelm our systems. This misdirected immune response can affect nearly any part of the body, causing chronic conditions that may weaken bodily functions and lead to decreased quality of life. So there are many different types of autoimmune diseases, and symptoms vary widely depending on which tissues are targeted. But the underlying problem is always the immune system's inability to distinguish self from non-self. And so menopause, as we all know, causes hormone levels of estrogen and progesterone and testosterone to drop, which can confuse the immune system and make it easier to attack the body by mistake. Also, with less estrogen, the body has more inflammation, and some autoimmune diseases, specifically like rheumatoid arthritis and MS, can get worse, while others, like lupus, may actually improve because it's different mechanisms. So these changes can mean symptoms like joint pain, tiredness, brain fog might get worse or change, and it's important to pay attention to how you feel as you age and to talk to your doctor about it. So hormones and immunity are connected, and menopause changes that balance. Menopause actually represents both a hormonal and immunological turning point. So why don't you guys drop a thumbs up in the chat if you've noticed any new health or inflammation changes since menopause, for those of you who are peri or menopausal.
So, oh, wow. Yes. Boy, we're getting a lot are coming in now.
Yep.
Absolutely.
There's always that little slight delay, and,
Yeah.
and they start rolling in.
There are people looking, going, where's the thumb? Where's the thumb?
Right? Can I
So,
give two thumbs?
absolutely. And I'm seeing yeses. Yeah. If you don't know where the thumb is, yes, definitely put a thumbs.
Yep, we've
So
got a two thumb. Yep.
putting yes. There you go.
Many thumbs. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, this is more prevalent than people realize. It's just we don't talk about it as much. It's like really the only time that this is discussed is either just with your family member of your immediate family and with your doctor. And this really needs to be shared more because it's suffering with these conditions is a terrible thing and it can feel very lonely. And, I mean, like Danielle's saying, yeah, she's getting these attacking feelings or joint pain. A lot of, I read earlier some other people saying about the joint pain, and some people might have Lyme disease. It just gets really wearing, very tiring living with that kind of pain, that kind of fatigue, that, your body almost working against you. So, definitely understandable. And, with all the testing and all the doctor's appointments. So it can be a bit overwhelming. And we want you to know that you have a family here. You have people who understand and want to help you understand at that root cause level.
So I think probably everyone is finished with the poll questions. Dr. Varden, would you like to go through those? And I'm still paying attention to the chat and all of the different conditions that people are saying they are suffering with right now. And our hearts go out to you. But in the meantime, Dr. Varden.
Thank you, Vinny, for bringing that up. And as you all can see, the thing is that when we talk about the connection of menopause and the immune system, most of you didn't even realize that there was a connection or that you may have heard about it, but you really don't have much information. Less than 10% of you actually have said that you're very familiar and that you have researched this topic. By the way, kudos to you guys for having that time and focus to be able to do that, not discounting the others, because that is what you are doing right now. You are taking the time to learn more about it, and that is fantastic. And we are so happy for you to be here to have that education to empower you more. So the second question that we asked was really about the experience of feeling that autoimmune and the symptoms of autoimmunity around menopause. And obviously from the chat and from what you guys are saying, and from here, overwhelmingly, yeah, you've noticed changes, and I'm sure that's why you are here tonight. With another, smaller percent saying, yeah, you were wondering about the link, and some people not noticing at all. But I'll bet after this webinar and after you hear some of the information, you'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess I did, experience those things, but, just not understanding the connection to it. And I do, and am very happy to see that topics that interest you are all of them because it's like, how do you choose just one? Trying to understand your hormones. And trust me, as a woman, gone through menopause and still early in that journey, going, what the heck are my hormones doing? And it's like, I do this for work, and there's still things that I am learning and experiencing when you're actually going through it. But also the inflammation. It's like, oh gosh, what do you do? Because you seem so sensitive all the time to everything, when it comes to inflammation. And it's just, I just don't want to have the inflammation and feel like shit anymore. It's like, let's see what we can do. And that really comes down to the last, choice about learning about your genes, the health risks. What do we do? So, because it all plays a part. And again, you've come to the right place. In our fourth question, when we talked about genetic testing, have you guys done this yet? More than half of you have. Well, I'd say actually more than 3/4 of you have. Most of you, yeah, you've looked at the results. Some others, well, yeah, didn't really understand it. Excuse me. And for those of you who haven't yet, maybe this will give you the insight or the little itch to want to know, what about those genes? Because we are going to be discussing some of those genes that both influence menopause and autoimmunity and how they connect together. And if that can provide you, which I know it will, if that provides you some insight on how you can help yourself, how you can make that useful to or what I should say for implementing recommendations or how to navigate to lower the inflammation to help you get better. That's what precision medicine is all about. That's what knowing your blueprint, you as an individual, is all about. And finally, we always want to know, what is it that you really want to learn here? What major takeaway do you want to take from this session? And I love it, all the above, because it is very important. So we got to keep this in mind, Dr. Steady, that we have to have clear information on menopause and autoimmunity, which you have already started to do. You talked about what immunity was, and we're going to dive a bit more into the menopause aspect and connection to that. But also practical tips. Everyone wants some practical tips. Give me something to help reduce this inflammation, and definitely about understanding your genes. You want to know how that influences both menopause and autoimmunity. So, all right, let's give them what they want.
Okay. So first, I want to kind of start with Dr. Varden. Why? What is it about these hormones dropping that can have these effects? So estrogen specifically helps to regulate immune tolerance, meaning it helps to keep it from becoming overreactive. So there are special proteins called estrogen receptors that are found on many immune cells. So there's this direct, they're talking to each other. Estrogen is talking to the immune cells. And these receptors let estrogen influence how genes are turned on and off and how immune cells grow and the release of signaling molecules called cytokines. And so when estrogen levels are higher, the body tends to have stronger antibody production and more anti-inflammatory immune responses, which sounds like they would be doing the opposite thing, but it's a both and in this case. But it can also limit but sometimes it can also limit the removal of self-reactive cells. Um, so so that's why in lupus, um, after menopause, sometimes things get better because of the auto antibody pathways. But in other things, it's when it's more about how inflammation affects things directly that estrogen levels being lower can feel worse. Um,
And
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, go
Well, I
ahead.
was going to say that, estrogen, you know, it especially has that immune calming effect. And I want to really let that sink in. Estrogen has an immune calming effect. It helps to lower or restrain inflammation. It keeps the immune system from overreacting. So during menopause, when our estrogen tanks, you know, we move out of that reproductive period. The ovaries dramatically reduce their production of estrogen and progesterone. These hormones, this turning point really disrupts the usual immune regulation and can trigger, worsen, or even unmask immune symptoms. So that's where some of the connection is. Now, if someone has MS or if someone has Hashimoto's or something like that, is it always hormones or perimenopause, menopause that is the cause? No. But what we are doing is we are taking that subset and we are saying how your hormone changes during menopause can influence or exacerbate an autoimmune condition. So we really want you to understand this is a subset and this is what can happen. This is how hormones, our main hormones that we make, affect and influence autoimmunity.
And some people might say that having this decrease in hormones can make a lot of different things that may have been felt more minor throughout our lives feel worse. So if insomnia was something that someone always had or could dip into at times, especially different times of the cycle, that might become worse. So and then there are some things, if people had particularly horrific cramps and things like that, then they're psyched that they're no longer menstruating because they're getting out of having those kinds of things going on. So it is a huge change, and paying attention to what else changes for you during that change actually gives a lot of insight into overall health and where to look for improving things like that. Um,
And I also want to mention like thyroid hormone, okay? Because it's not just about estrogen and progesterone. You know, thyroid hormone, that activity, remember the thyroid is your metabolic regulator, okay? And that can be less or become less efficient and more unpredictable during this transition. And that can aggravate things, symptoms like fatigue, temperature regulation, and other immune disrupted symptoms. So it's it is connected. It's not just about the sex hormones that we think of estrogen, progesterone.
and that's one of the reasons that it's really important in this age bracket to get tested for do a full thyroid panel to just see what's going on. And just testing TSH probably is not enough. I'm curious, in the chat, what was the very first change that any of you noticed when you started to go through menopause, that it kind of falls into this category? Because it's different for different people. And I'm just curious what our audience has to say about that.
Well, Danielle is saying temperature changes is what she really experienced, and which affected her sleep because she's saying no on the sleep. Yeah, the hot flashes, really bad hot flashes. Sue saying hair loss. Jennifer just saying I just wasn't feeling like myself at all. Taya saying dizziness. Sharon saying fatigue and brain fog. Let's see, Sheila said insomnia, temperature changes. There's a lot of temperature changes, yes, because estrogen helps with that thermal regulation, that barometer, that our thermostat of the brain. And you know, when it goes down, it just goes wacky. I mean, it's just, and that's where the hot flashes, the night sweats come in. And actually, we've got Shamila said she had increased menstrual cramps that she had never experienced before. So, you know, in perimenopause, we're still cycling. It's just what it does, because I've got some good friends who are gynecologists, and, you know, they had said that you can actually, as you are starting to like enter perimenopause, your cycle can get erratic. It can get longer or shorter. And it's, if you were always regular, it'll start, you know, kind of going a little crazy. Then it'll get very regular. Now, granted, this isn't what everybody goes through, but this is what they told me they have found as, you know, larger populations of their patients, where to get really regular, and then it may spread out some more, and then it'll eventually stop. You know, after 12 months, you are technically in menopause after you haven't had a period for that long. So, you know, or if you were very irregular in your cycles, they'll start getting more regular. And actually, that's what I personally had found is I hit that, you know, regular cycle, then it started spreading out. So, you know, with that, you still can have those symptoms as your hormones are doing their regular monthly cycling. And then symptomology can actually be exacerbated through these other changes. You know, some of the things that we had mentioned and talked about, you know, when we're talking about thyroid function, joint pain, that fatigue, and then Tatum saying mood and weight gain. One part that just really sucks.
And those overlap with thyroid issues, with hypothyroidism, right? So it's one of those things where you want to be monitoring both things at the same time in those cases. And I saw in the chat also digestive
Mhm.
issues, and you know, our hormones also have an effect on the digestive tract, on the gut. So it's no surprise that because we do have these receptors everywhere, that this is something that happens during this time of life. Yeah. Um, Interestingly, one of the studies that we were reading also talked about how menopause can change the way that body responds to treatments for autoimmune diseases because hormone balance affects inflammation and medication metabolism. So things that used to keep inflammation down, it can be affected. And sometimes that means that side effects can go up, or sometimes it means that they don't work as well, or it could be a buildup of them depending on someone's genetics and also on what happens with aging.
Yeah, in that particular study, and you're talking about the uh, impact of menopause on autoimmune diseases. Yeah,
Hmm.
that study just came out earlier this year, people. So we are talking a 2025 study. It was in clinical reviews in allergy and immunology. And it really represented a major inflection point in women's immune aging, reshaping that landscape of autoimmune and, even like rheumatoid, sorry, words, rheumatic diseases. And the authors really highlighted multiple interconnected pathways where estrogen decline shifts immune balance toward inflammation, altering that disease expression, the types of symptoms and the way, like Dr. Hardcastle was saying, shifting how they reacted to treatments. And in many cases, it actually heightened autoimmunity. So, when you're talking about the estrogen shifts, okay, you are increasing pro-inflammatory cytokine production. Okay, and I know Dr. Studies, so I know I'm jumping between study Hardcastle. I can just
Just pick one. It's too long.
saying that increasing those pro-inflammatory cytokines, it becomes, excuse me, between that and increase in certain regulatory cells, okay, you do become more prone to autoantibody formation. And that's why, I don't know if you guys knew, but women are, I think, like 80% of all autoimmunity are in women. That's huge. And when you start stratifying, looking at ages and that, it's more heavily weighted for those in that menopause time period because of this, because it does influence it. Again, it doesn't necessarily cause it. It's just that it will influence it. And this is where, some of that inflammaging can come in, where the aging and the estrogen loss, they kick up that immune activity, because the paper really described menopause as a biological state where pro-inflammatory molecules rise, senescent immune cells accumulate. You're probably going, what the heck is a senescent immune cell? A senescent cell is basically a zombie cell. It's there, it's not dead, it's using up resources, but it's not producing anything. It's a zombie cell. It's just kind of taking up space. And this is part of the thing that we want, is we want to be able to clear those senescent cells. We want them to be recycled, get them out of there, stop using up the good resources that our younger cells need for repair and good health. Okay. So, when we're talking about these immune cells that have become senescent, how do we get rid of them? Well, there are some ways. Some fasting is actually really good, because what you want to do is you want to upregulate autophagy. the self-eating, the clearance of these cells. Now, does that mean everybody should go fast? No. This is where you really need to work with a practitioner, make sure that this is something that your body is prepared for. But I'm just saying, in literature, in research, in clinical work, fasting does show to increase autophagy in the clearance of senescent cells. There are also wonderful products that help to upregulate the clearance of senescent cells. But in other aspects, the immune system, the authors had found, becomes more reactive, less regulated, because remember what we talked about, that estrogen and progesterone help to modulate that regulation of immune cells. Well, if it's not there to do that job, then your immune system runs amok. And this is the state that they call inflammaging. So, this word, this, aspect when it comes to menopause and hormonal changes, this really pays attention to, this study in particular paid attention to that, those changes and how it affects women overall and in certain autoimmune conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, systemic lupus erythematosus, Sjogren's disease, so and other ones. So they actually were saying that there was something else that I'm trying to think of as far as some work that they had done that they initiated, because I know that they did some things for hormone replacement therapy in there. So again, if this is something that you are interested in, definitely speak with your doctor, because that where it can help or hurt, because I believe they had found, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Steady, that HRT has disease-specific effects. That I
Yes.
believe they said it may worsen risk of Sjogren's. I think there was
Lupus.
or neutral effects for lupus, but it may help prevent pulmonary hypertension in some systemic sclerosis. But they did find that overall high quality HRT trials, unfortunately, are scarce. And this is why it's very important for you to work with a practitioner to understand if that is the best thing for you.
Because once again, it's individual,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, and that's also where looking at someone's genetics and how they metabolize hormones can be really helpful. And I wonder, the studies that I would love to be doing are also genetics based. So, of the people who have these particular autoimmune diseases, if they have certain genetics, do they respond differently to certain interventions than others? I feel like that's where we're headed as a in medicine right now, and that is exciting to me because that means that we can better help everyone with that kind of information. So we did look at a
Oh,
at a at a second
so
study. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I wanted to mention, because Lauren was just saying it can be confusing, the black box warning risk of heart attack, stroke. By the way, because that I know what you're talking about, the one that they put on hormone replacement therapies, that is now being removed. I mean, and that was as of what, a week and a half ago.
Yep.
Yeah, the FDA black box warning on hormone replacement is now being removed because of what we have learned since the Women's Health Initiative, which was the precipitous of having that black box warning that happened back in the early 2000s. We've got several webinars, diving into that and debunking that. But they have gone back in and looked at the data, have reanalyzed it and realized, oh, yeah, no, it really wasn't quite what we thought it was or what we told everybody it was back in the early 2000s. So that finally is being reexamined, or actually it has been reexamined. That's why they are removing that warning.
And also there have been subsequent studies done
Mhm.
too. Sorry, go
Yes.
ahead. Didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, no, that's okay. I just wanted to mention, because Madeline was saying, how long do you have to take bioidentical estrogen and progesterone topical to notice any effects? That depends. I will tell you personally uh, that I noticed differences, I'd say, within the first couple of weeks. Um, my hot flashes, night sweats, not like I had it real bad, but gone. And it just got better. So, but again, kind of depends. Dr. Steady, do you have any uh, comments on that?
Well, it partly depends on what dosage you start with, where you are in perimenopause or menopause, and what your genetics are. So, therefore, how quickly you might be clearing them. So, um, usually it's fairly quick. But if it's not pretty quick, then you may want to look at why. Um, and so, if someone is clearing them really quickly, they may need a higher dose. But if someone, it turns out, hasn't been clearing them quickly and was already in a state of some sort of estrogen toxicity or something like that because of their genetics, and that can be told both with genetics and with urine testing, how you're metabolizing your hormones, then they may not feel that difference. So depending on where you are in the intervention. So some people want to start during perimenopause, and that can be fine, but you really need to know what's happening with your hormones in that moment, because perimenopause is also a time of a little bit of a roller coaster, where you can have both symptoms of low estrogen and high estrogen because it's kind of going like this, because it's still kind of in that little engine that could kind of mode. I think I can, trying to function the way that you always have, the way that the body always has, and not quite being able to pull it off. So, not knowing where you are in or what kind of HRT you're doing or anything like that, and not being your doctor, I can't necessarily speak to that, but it in hopefully it's pretty quick. If everything goes right and you're at the right phase with the right dose and the right clearance, it should be pretty quick, because um, it's so drastic, the effects that hormones have on us.
Mm-hmm. And, we have some people who shared saying, hey, when I got on it, noticed a dramatic difference within 3 days. Others, giving semi-similar things, or comments like that. So,
I have seen it be life changing for
oh yeah.
people, and I've seen it not be life changing for people too. But for some people, it has really been almost miraculous, the changes that they see when they go on HRT. So it once again, it really depends
Mm-hmm.
on who you are. Yeah.
And I'll tell you, knowing your genetics really can play an important part in that determination, in what you should be taking, how you should be taking it, etc. So that, again, like Dr. Study had said, this is very personalized, and having this information, knowing your blueprint, knowing your hormone profile, the way you process and convert your sex hormones, progesterone to testosterone, testosterone to dihydrotestosterone, testosterone to estrogen, how that estrogen is, metabolized into its metabolites, how it's cleared. All of that is very important to know and can inform you on your history, why you've had certain symptoms that you've been having, and how that can be supported. So that way, moving forward, so you can minimize any type of symptoms and support your body the best way possible. So, by the way, if you guys have questions, put it in the Q&A, please. We've got a lot of beautiful, wonderful questions and comments that I'm seeing in the chat, and there's just like, it's hard to sometimes keep track, and I don't want to be missing any of your excellent questions. So please put them in the Q&A, and we will make sure to get to them.
I just wanted to go over quickly some skin and gut things, because I feel like they're not talked about, but there are autoimmune conditions that really affect that maybe some of our audience have been diagnosed with. With skin, it can be show up as psoriasis, vitiligo, scleroderma, and um, uh, and lichen planus and lichen sclerosis are all um, things that can show up. And for the gut, some of the common ones would be suddenly realizing that you have celiac because you can't you because the symptoms actually become worse to the point where one notices. And I definitely had a lot of patients um, back in the day going through perimenopause and menopause and couldn't figure it out, and then they got tested and it turned out that they had celiac the whole time, but it became unmanageable at that point. And fortunately, now we have testing that can be done ahead of time, and people can know that before damage starts to take hold and before things start to get worse when people are younger, which is really nice. Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, um, and autoimmune gastritis are all also things that can escalate or show up. They may, like I said, they may have been there, but they may become worse to the point where someone can't just take something over the counter or something herbal like bitters or something like that anymore and kind of fake it anymore. So I wanted to not ignore some things that I had seen in the chat and link them and say, yes, these are things that can be also affected.
And please know that, as we are seeing comments and questions, because I am seeing several that you all are sharing such wonderful, vulnerable information about yourselves. But please realize that even though we may be doctors, we are not your doctor. We don't have your history. We cannot give any medical advice, especially on any particular condition or situation. The information that we provide is educational, semi-theoretical, based on research, based on clinical observations, but more of general information. So I do want to let you guys know that, so that it's not that we are ignoring you. It's not that we don't want to help you. It's just we have to stay within our scope and legality wise. So,
But we are reading them and we are witnessing you. And just so that you know that when one of us is talking, the other one's uh, listening, but also checking out what you're saying.
and I do want to also say, if you are hurting, if you really need that help and you are not getting it anywhere else, please contact us. We've dropped some links in the chat. We'll have Vanny drop it again. If you would like to work with us, we are here and we can help you. I can't guarantee things, but we can help you understand your genes. We can help you understand and look at labs. We can help navigate this with you. Okay. So, we can work with you. So please, reach out if that is something that you are called to do. We would be more than happy to work with you.
So, Dr. Varden, I think we should probably talk about some of the genes that can also impact um, both hormonal things and autoimmune, and especially places where they overlap. So, what are some of the first places we already we both kind of tiptoed into some of these, but why don't you pick one that you think of when you think of this situation?
Well, really, it takes me to looking at the genes, looking at the way that we break down our estrogens, break down um, the hormones, break down the neurotransmitters, processing this because, one of the genes, COMT gene, catecholomethyltransferase, okay, COMT. And depending on how that particular gene, if it's fast, if it's slow. Okay, so I'm going to give you a little bit of grounding because I do like to do this, because many of you who have done your DNA 360 are going, where can I find this? You want to look in your, you can look in your mood and behavior um, report, okay? You could look in your, it's kind of scattered throughout. You know what? Let me just leave it at look in your mood and behavior. So you're going to be looking at COMT. And if you have a GG version, that means you're fast. That means you break down, estrogens, these catecholamines quickly. You clear them quickly. Okay. If you have an AA, that means that you are slow at clearing them. So they stick around a little bit longer. All right. If you're an AG, that's just moderate for that clearance. So when we're talking about some of these genes, okay, like the COMT, because it's very ubiquitous, it puts a methyl group onto the substrate, whether it's the neurotransmitter, whether it is the estrogen metabolite, okay, but what it does is it breaks down the estrogens and stress-related neurotransmitters like dopamine, norepinephrine, epinephrine, okay? And when you have a slower COMT, a slower variant, that reduces the enzymatic activity. So the estrogen metabolites, the stress hormones, they linger longer. That increases inflammation and oxidative stress. So understanding that you're not broken, there's nothing wrong with you. This is just the way your genes are functioning. Okay. This is just the way it works, but it doesn't mean you have to stay in there. There are ways that you can support your body, that you can support a slow COMT or kind of, slow down a fast COMT if that's what's needed. Because when you're talking about a clinical impact of like what happens, when you have a slow COMT, that can magnify menopausal symptoms. You guys are saying, yeah, this sucks, the mood swings, the sleep disruption, the joint pain, and it can also raise autoimmune risk because it sustains that chronic inflammation. So that's how, taking that gene and looking at menopause, at your sex hormones, estrogen in this case, and looking at how that can impact your immunity and influence or increase autoimmunity, okay, increasing that inflammation, which are those symptoms that you're feeling downstream. So do you want to throw out another one that
Well, I was thinking about mitochondrial health and how that relates to energy and, that we have mitochondria in all of our cells. And so that makes me think of a dynamic duo of SOD2 and GPX. And you can find these in the inflammatory, it's called inflammation and what else, Dr. Varden? Um,
it's anti-inflammatory anti-inflammation profile.
and so between the two of us, we've got it down. So when you're looking at SOD2, it helps to disperse reactive oxygen species from the mitochondria. So it helps to filter things and within the mitochondria itself, which is you may have learned about this in high school biology as the powerhouse of the cell where we make our energy, right? That feels kind of important. And when you're talking about brain fog and you're talking about fatigue and you're talking about just sort of sluggishness and inflammation, it does make me think of people's mitochondria. And so if you have a CC version, all right, so I have to take a break here. Just a quick one. You want to look at the SOD2 and the GPX together because them matching up in certain ways is kind of important. So I'm going to say that CC is ideal because it's fast at filtering, but not if you have a TT GPX. Because then when SOD2 helps to convert oxidants into hydrogen peroxide, if the GPX is a lot slower, you're going to end up with more hydrogen peroxide in the cell than you want. So that mismatch, if you're like it says ideal, but then it or if there's confusing information, it's probably because the two of them need to be looked at together. Sometimes in the reports, the way that it's written, I just like to be clear when something needs to be read with something else. So CT and CT would match up. And if you have a TT and a TT, then once again, you're sort of in sync. Things are slower. So with TT, 60 to 80% slower um, filtration and conversion of oxidants into antioxidants. But at least if your GPX is also slow, you're not ending up in the peroxide state. And that means that you want to be careful then about how many antioxidant things you do that are in more supplement form, like food. Go for it as much as you want to. Whereas if you have a TT SOD2, but you have a faster GPX, then you can start using more antioxidant supplements and things like that in order to, I mean, you have to look at all of your genes. And I'm not advising any one of you to start hitting the antioxidants hard. I'm just saying, generally speaking, these are the patterns that we're looking for. Do you have anything to add, Dr. Varden?
Well, I wanted to mention, because I think you covered the antioxidation pathway well, and how to help support it. Uh, Lean into foods first, for sure. But I didn't mention, especially for slow COMT, you know, supporting that, uh, because it is so important. And generally, it's more the slow comps for those clearances that I find need support more than rather a fast comp, even though that can be problematic. But certain things, and this isn't this is more of a general, okay, because obviously you would need to speak to your practitioner and figure out what is best for you. So if you just see like if you have a GG, don't necessarily jump into doing these things. I'm just saying, hey, ways that you can optimize or help with a slow comp. Magnesium, okay, this is a cofactor for COMT. Most people with slow COMTs benefit from some sort of magnesium supplement. And honestly, most people need some magnesium because it's not in our food too much anymore. So, again, how much? Well, that depends. You'd have to speak with your practitioner. But your B vitamins, because remember, COMT is part of the methylation pathway. So if you have disruption in your methylation pathway, which is really important for estrogen metabolism and clearance, that needs support. Well, how do you support your methylation pathway? B vitamins, okay? Making sure you have things like B12 or B12 cobalamin, B9 folate, B2 riboflavin, things like that. The form of which your genes dictate. So that's something you actually have to take a look at to see, can I take a methylated form? Do I need an adenylated form? How do I need this to help and best support my body? That's in your genes. But also, there are lifestyle things that you can do to help reduce the catecholamine load and that estrogen burden. And that's things like minimize the caffeine. Now, granted, I love my coffee, but I do have to be careful. Instead of having 2 or 3 cups, I just have my one. Okay. So minimize caffeine, minimize alcohol. You want to reduce high stress situations. If you can avoid them and not have to deal with it, then do that. If you have to deal with it, then learn some techniques to be able to regulate and to calm yourself, activate that vagal tone. But you also want to avoid xenoestrogens. So we're talking things like plastics, parabens, soy. Consider some gentle estrogen supporting nutrients. Again, this would be specific, discussed with your practitioner to see if this would be the best thing. But people take things like calcium D-glucarate, DIM, especially if there's excess estrogen present. But again, this is where test, don't guess. Know your genes, but then know what you are currently expressing by having like a Dutch test, a dried urine test of comprehensive hormones, or a blood test to know what am I actually producing for metabolites, because you don't want to be taking supplementation or heavy on certain foods that can end up causing problems instead of being helpful. Okay. So, and by the way, these things that I'm telling you will also help in a general sense. And that's why I'm spending a little bit of time on this, because you guys want some actionable items. You sent that in the Q&A, or in our poll questions, that this will help to regulate your body as well, not just for a slow COMT. You want to prioritize stress reduction and sleep. I know sleep can be disrupted due to hormones, and it can kind of be like a chicken or the egg type of thing, but lean in even more when it comes to sleep hygiene. Do those things that help to calm the nervous system, to allow for efficient hormonal and neurotransmitter clearance. And again, using those techniques for mind body practices, breath work, yoga, nature exposure, grounding. All of these things can help to lower the stress hormones and to balance your body. So, any other little pearls of action that people
I
can
pro
implement?
I probably will sound like a broken record with these two, but that's okay. Well, these three actually. Fiber. And when I say fiber, I primarily mean in the form of food. Not necessarily, I mean, it's not that there isn't a place for things like psyllium and things like that, but the other nutrients that you get from fruits and vegetables, and if you can tolerate starches, which your genetics will help tell you, whole grains, things like that, they're feeding you on a different level. They're not just moving things through. They're not just feeding your gut microbiome, they're also feeding you nutrients that you really need, and many of them are anti-inflammatory. So I think that using food as medicine and focusing on fiber is a really important thing to do, and getting your vitamin D status checked, because vitamin D can really play into a lot of different things, including sleep. Knowing when you need to take your vitamin D, how much you need to take of it. There are 3 genes that we test for that all have to do with vitamin D timing and amounts and all of those things. And so knowing your genetics and knowing what your baseline is, so that you know where you need to get to, is really important. And then the third one is movement. And I'm not saying that you need to go out and run a marathon. I wouldn't do that. So I'm not going to tell you to do it.
Either.
I walked a half marathon. I felt like that was pretty good. But um, movement is anti-inflammatory. And sometimes when people have autoimmune things, they're tired and their pain can kick in really fast. And so exercise of any kind, even taking a walk, can feel like the worst idea. But it's shown that as time goes on, the movement and the anti-inflammatory properties of gentle exercise even really can make a difference in autoimmune things. It's just getting through that first little um, bit of it. And sometimes if you can bring down inflammation a little bit with food, and lifestyle changes, then the exercise isn't as bad when you start to do it. So they're together, all of these things that Dr. Varden and I have just mentioned can really make a big difference.
And get your vitamin D levels tested. I know that, our mainstream doctors generally do not, request that marker. It's not that much. Ask them, to see if they'll add that blood marker onto your blood work when you go have it done. Very, very important, because there are vitamin D receptors on virtually every single cell in the body. Vitamin D, which is a hormone, is necessary in the functioning of over 10% of all of our protein coding genes. Okay. There's over 22,000 protein coding genes, guys. It is also very important in the regulation of our sex hormones. And low vitamin D levels weaken immune regulation. It increases inflammation, and it can contribute to autoimmune risk after menopause. And yes, this has been studied. There's scientific evidence for this. So you really want to make sure that these, micronutrients are sufficient. You don't want to be in deficiency for sure. You don't even want to be in insufficiency. So get your levels checked.
So, Dr. Varden, we have a lot of questions,
I see that.
which is exciting to us. We love your questions
Yes,
and we
it
love
is.
answering them. What we're going to do probably is we're going to try and get through as many of them as we can. Some of them, it's almost guaranteed some of you have asked similar questions, so we might kind of group some together. And if we don't get through all of them, we will answer them afterward and they'll get posted with the YouTube. So don't worry that you're going to be ignored if you asked a question 5 minutes ago, because we will eventually get to it. So without further ado, shall we get started?
Yes.
Okay. Jennifer
Um,
is, oh, go ahead.
well, no, no, no. Actually, it's you were starting to say for Jennifer's, the only thing is that again, there's a lot of a personal situation markers and saying, hey, what can I do to best support my body for this? And again, we have to be very careful, because we cannot give medical advice, for the situation but we can answer more of a general thing. So to put this in context, she was talking about being on HRT, her blood markers, elevated ANA markers. She has Hashimoto's, which also reactivated Epstein-Barr virus. So let's take this into the Epstein-Barr virus aspect, because obviously Epstein-Barr, okay, this is related to mononucleosis. It is a latent virus after you have had, the active infection. It never goes away, okay? It remains encapsulated in the body, all right? And when your immune system is compromised, it can reawaken and cause havoc. And so that's what we call a latent virus. So she's correct. No, it's not curable. It does influence and can, cause joint pain, fatigue. So, Dr. Steady, having that in mind, just more of a general sense, do you have any advice as far as like with EBV, with joint pain and fatigue?
So can EBV kind of be put back in the box so that it's not, um, there are two tests that can be done. One is like, are you experiencing this as an active thing in your system? And one, have you been exposed to this, right? So can people who are in the you're actively dealing with this now category go back into the you've been exposed to a category? Yes. And um, so this is where the autoimmune thing is an interesting thing because we want to make sure that the our immune system is strong enough to kind of put it back in the box without attacking the body. And so knowing this is where also knowing your genetics really comes in handy because there are certain foundational nutrients, zinc, vitamin D, vitamin A, vitamin C, that if your genes are suboptimal for them, your immune system isn't going to be optimal for them, right? And but also you want to look and see are there things that I can be doing with my lifestyle to reduce inflammation, to detox better, all of these little pieces together to try and manage the situation and and even though it's not curable, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to be bothersome because not everyone who's carrying it is suffering with it right now. So it's a matter of management and knowing yourself and having a practitioner who can look at all of you and say, okay, we need to do this testing, we need to know your genetics, and then we're going to figure out a plan for you to try and optimize your health instead of looking just at the things that are wrong.
Thank you for that. All right, let's go on to Sheila's question. So Sheila's asking, what could potentially cause a positive ANA speckled presentation if negative for lupus, Sjogren's, and RA, which is rheumatoid arthritis? Can a positive ANA result be reversed? Um, I'll give a brief little, thing on that, and then Dr. Steady, if you have anything to add, please do so. I know that a positive ANA with like the speckled powder, even if negative for those other things, that can actually be somewhat common and can be triggered by other autoimmune conditions like mixed connective tissue disease or autoimmune thyroid disorders or scleroderma. It can also be triggered by chronic infections, some medications, or even without any disease, because actually up to 20% of healthy people can show this result at times. ANA levels, they can decrease or even become negative as immune triggers resolve. Okay. But the result itself, it's not a disease, and it does require clinical interpretation based on symptoms, other labs, history. This is where going to your doctor and who has all of this other information can do that appropriate clinical interpretation. But just as a general question that you asked, I mean, that's my understanding and knowledge of it. Do you have anything to add, Dr. Steady?
I was just going to say that the tricky thing about it is that it's not very specific, right? So that's what Dr. Varden's saying, is that there are so many things that can cause it that while it's a helpful test, it doesn't only point in one direction. So it's sensitive but not specific, and so it's part of the bigger picture of testing that can be done. So
Right. Yeah, because it's not that it cannot be treated per se. And I did do little air quotes for that. It's rather like managing or resolving the triggers, that caused it, that can normalize those levels for some individuals. So, but good question. All right. So Janai is saying menopause and lymphatic system, 8 years into menopause hasn't been great. No. Under the arms and legs, having pain only on occasion. Not quite sure exactly where the question is.
um,
Yeah, go ahead.
it sounds to me like advice on helping the lymph system. That there can be pain under the arms and legs, maybe like in lymph node areas, is how I'm reading the question. I know I'm going to let Dr. Varden, I know what Dr. Varden's going to say, and I'm going to let her say it. I'm going to say, before she says what she's going to say, um, uh, making sure that you're well hydrated, that you're moving, because the lymph doesn't have a heart, right? Our blood has a heart to pump it around, and but the lymph doesn't. It relies on movement in order to do that. And also, some people do lymph drainage therapy, which when I learned to do it, the teacher called it lymph drainage. And so I always want to say that, and then people think I'm odd. But anyway, now Dr. Varden, I know, also has some things that she likes to talk about with lymph.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. When it comes to lymph, really, it's the muscles that move it. And there are a few things that I have my clients do that I do personally. If you are physically able, a rebounder, those little mini trampolines, just some nice light bouncing. You don't even have to catch any air, but that activates the muscles, especially in the legs, that helps get that movement going. Also, dry brushing. Remember, lymph is just underneath the skin. You don't want to use heavy pressure, okay, because that can actually block it. Just nice light movements, as you are going, toward the lymphatic drainage, and there are great videos on it. Kelly Kennedy, love her. We call her the lymph queen. She's got videos on how to do it correctly. So again, there are many different things, but definitely the hydration, really, really important. And just having some movement is super important. And that helps in overall health and toxin drainage. All right. So we have a question from Fabiola. And she's asking, will fibromyalgia get worse with menopause? And unfortunately, Commonly, yes, it does. Because what ends up happening is that due to that decline and the fluctuations of estrogen and the other hormones, that can increase pain sensitivity, disrupts your sleep, causes the fatigue, the mood swings, and all the things that you guys have mentioned, excuse me, in the chat and are very familiar with. And studies and clinical reports consistently show that women may experience more intense fibromyalgia symptoms after menopause, and new cases of fibromyalgia sometimes begin during that menopausal transition. Yeah, that sucks. But all the more to lean in for self care, taking care of yourself.
And I just want to also throw out there, we spend a lot of time talking about estrogen, but progesterone is also an anti-inflammatory. There are also lots of receptors for progesterone in the spine and in the brain. And it also can help with anxiety and things like that, and certainly with sleep. So I feel like a little bit were more skewed toward estrogen during this webinar, but we do have other webinars where we talk at length about progesterone. But I wanted to give it a little plug in that moment specifically.
All right. Mia's question is a bit more specific, and a little rather hesitant
Yeah,
to get into
agreed.
that. So let's generalize that a little bit. When we're talking about estradiol levels, progesterone levels, it seems like from a blood test, um, you know, as far as different ways that it can cause anxiety. Well, obviously, we have spoken about that. And the fact that, yes, when there are basically, she's asking, hey, can these certain levels cause anxiety? Big difference between her levels and using a patch and stuff. And again, I want to reiterate that when you have disruption in your hormone levels, your body is trying to adjust. It's trying to get back to a homeostasis. And when those hormones are just not there, it, there's a dysbiosis, a disruption in the system, and that's when these symptoms come up because it's trying to re-regulate, and it's having a very difficult time doing that because it doesn't have those raw materials on which to do it. Okay, and if you are taking hormone therapy, great, but it doesn't mean that just taking hormone therapy is going to solve everything. There is a precision in which to do that. So this is where it's we are getting more, and when I say we, I'm talking about science, doctors, the whole system. We are learning more to be even more precise in the prescriptive nature of hormone therapy. But again, with all of these things, and as what we believe and work in as the DNA company, it is in precision medicine. It is very personalized because it takes into account your genes, it takes into account your current situation, your history, all of these things. So what is it exactly for you? Sometimes you do need to kind of figure that out as you go. But we try to narrow out the guessing game of it. But I do appreciate these questions, and I know that they're very important to all of you, to each one of you who asks these specific things. Just realize the difficulty we have in not knowing the full picture and the limitations that we have, but we do appreciate the questions. Okay, so
What I
yeah,
what I would just like to quickly add to that is that whoever's prescribing your HRT can monitor all of this for you, and just to keep in mind that those two hormones are being measured in different what do you call them? Different.
testing or
Uh, one is in picograms and one is in
Oh, the units, the
Thank you.
units that
I
they're being
couldn't think of the
measured.
word unit.
Yeah. Yeah, the absolute values are different, and it's understanding where these absolute values are.
So find someone who can do that for you, and
Right.
don't look at that at face value necessarily. And I'm not saying that it's right or wrong what your levels are. I'm just saying find someone who can help you interpret that.
Madeline's question we actually already answered.
Yep.
She just, how long does it take for bioidentical
Yep.
hormones? Notice. So, yeah.
And
Yeah.
Vanny, can you please put the study in the chat for Sheila?
Yeah,
And if
actually, yeah, the two studies that we talked about, and we dove a little bit more into the one uh, impact of menopause and autoimmune diseases, the one that came out this year.
I can also copy it into the thing
Yeah.
if necessary.
Okay, so Rose is saying progesterone and testosterone helps, but as soon as I add estrogen, my breasts get stabbing pain. She has Sjogren's. Um, Maybe if we have some insight into why that may happen. I mean, it wouldn't necessarily be in her specific case, but um, do you have any insights on why something like that might happen?
One moment, I decided that I was going to paste the
Oh, I'm
study
sorry.
into the chat, so I did. Okay. Um, okay. I did read this question though. As soon as estrogen, breast get stabbing pain, Sjogren. So what I would be, my answer to this would be, I would be looking to how your body is metabolizing all of your hormones, and what the balance is there. So that this is where finding a practitioner, doing some urine testing, and seeing, what's happening, what your body's actually doing, um, would be my recommendation for that.
All right. So Tatum, um, basically they're asking, is it ever too late to start HRT? The answer is no. It's never too late. Um, Obviously, research has shown the sooner you start it, even in while you're in perimenopause, not even in full menopause. If you start in perimenopause, you actually get even more benefits from it. But no, it's never too late to start. But please speak with a practitioner who knows what they're doing. Give that little caveat. All right, Madeline, would bioidentical hormones have an effect on autoimmune diseases as well? I've been, okay. And then she just says things that she's been taking with no effect on autoimmune or bone loss. Um, well, okay. So bioidentical hormones can obviously have an effect on autoimmune diseases, like what we've been talking about, how it influences. But depending on why or what else is going on, if those are not addressed, then your symptoms can remain exacerbated. They may, be modulated somewhat through the hormones, but then again, depending on, well, I mean, I know you put in the milligrams, but there's more to it than just that. Um, there there would be other things if I were the practitioner that I would be asking, that I would be looking to, especially if you've been on it a year and have, well, you're saying no effect. I'd have more questions. Um, so for bone loss, I mean, yeah, the hormones play a big part in helping with bone integrity, but there's more to it than that as well. How's your diet? What kind of micronutrients are you deficient in or insufficient in? Do you have any um, toxicity, heavy metal, anything like that? Because that also will affect the body's ability to bring nutrients into the bones to help with that structural integrity. You know, collagen, different things. So, there are a lot of other players, other aspects that are and that can affect the situation. Um, especially if those don't seem to be making any difference.
And also seeing what the blood levels are at those dosages, and how your body's metabolizing them. So,
Right. Nina. Hi, Nina. Nina is asking, is there any treatment with reverse T3 administration? So with the thyroid.
Well, and that's a one tests for that in a full thyroid panel. Um, I don't know, as I've heard of that being administered as a treatment.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any. So sorry we couldn't
Something
be
to
of.
look up later, Nina.
Yeah,
Our
definitely.
our audience always gives us lots of other rabbit holes for us to go down, don't they, Dr. Varden?
Absolutely. Okay, so Sheila is asking, is celiac tested for the gut in the gut 360? Um, well, we do have the genes, um, the HLA genes, to see if you are celiac.
That's in the DNA 360.
Right.
Yeah.
DNA 360. Um,
Well, the gut 360 is testing the microbiome.
right.
So that would be what kinds of bacteria are in the gut more than celiac is a more of a genetic thing. So the gut microbiome is what's living there with you, not what is not your genetic blueprint.
Yeah, because generally for celiac, like if someone has active celiac, for example, if you have HLA genes that show that you are, celiac sensitive, okay, or that you could be at risk of celiacs, doesn't mean you actually have it or that you're having symptoms, okay? Because again, your DNA is not diagnostic. The DNA 360 is not diagnostic. It just tells you about risks, or functional pathways, etc. When you're talking about testing for celiacs, that's really looking for antibodies, an antibody test, and that's a blood test. Our gut 360 premium test is a stool test, your poop. Okay, so we're looking at that biome, the microbiome, and different species, and how that can impact inflammation and other aspects of health. So two totally different tests. So, but all of it can give good information in just different ways. More pieces to the puzzle. All right. Our next question is from Michelle. What can our DNA tests make us aware of, and what are some actions we can take to reduce possibility of disease and inflammation? Wow, that's a very big question. Actually, that's everything that
That's
we do.
all of our webinars.
Yeah, right. I couldn't put that in a in like a 10-second answer because that's everything. I mean, it's exactly what we do.
Right. Right.
So
It's also an excellent question
it is
because
a
that's
beautiful
why we
question.
get up here 3 nights a week. To talk to all of you and with all of you is because everything in the tests is actionable. So it's that's exactly what the test does. That's exactly what we talk to our patients about, and that's exactly what all of our webinars about. So hopefully, looking at the timestamp, hopefully we gave you some answers, but the answer is all of the genes that we test for. So
Yes. And we hope that if you have not done your DNA 360, that you will, and you will open up that beautiful book blueprint that is you, and be able to give you some insights on how to optimize your health. All right. So Madeline has a question of, would your test show whether my genes have predisposition for skin, scalp, autoimmune diseases, most likely caused by mold? And the thing is that our our testing is not disease specific. It is not looking at that, oh, let's look at the disease, let's look at the leaves on a tree, and I'm going to use that analogy. As a tree, we look at the roots. what is dysregulated in your pathways, especially when it comes to detoxification, inflammation, different aspects of gut, that can influence or make you that much more sensitive to mold, to possibly having an autoimmune condition. So those are the kinds of things that we can look at. Genes like your HLAs, the GSTs, your glutathione conjugation pathway, genes that look at the gut, and gosh, your methylation, your all many of the things that we've already talked about, even right down to your hormones, because that will affect it too. All right, so we've got okay, so Chelsea's asking, how does estrogen dominance affect people with autoimmune diseases and perimenopause? How does that come into play?
So remember when I was saying that during perimenopause specifically, the estrogen levels can you can have signs of estrogen being low and of it being high, and that's because things are in flux during that time. Now, if you are genetically also predisposed to estrogen dominance, then you can see that can be exacerbated during this time. Or it could not, because you might not have quite the lows. You may just, so it may not try to get to the highs, if that makes any sense. But the clearance and the toxicity are definitely things that you would want to be looking for during this perimenopause transition. And our genes will test for this, and you can do the Dutch test to see what's actually happening. Because if you are at risk for estrogen toxicity, that is inflammatory. And so that inflammation can definitely affect these autoimmune conditions for sure. So that's the way that I would, in the 1 minute that I have left, to describe it as fast as I can.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of like going through. Nina said she meant reverse T4 again. I don't believe there's any current clinical use or treatment involving reverse T4 either. So, but thank you for asking. Doesn't mean that there may not be. It's just I'm not aware of it, and you know. All right. So Joy is saying, so would a TT SOD2 and a CT GPX be considered good?
So we don't really talk about things in terms of good and bad necessarily, but what it does mean is that your GPX is faster than your SOD2. So that means that your SOD2 is 60 to 80% slower, but you can help it along with the use of some not you specifically, one could, um, with the use of some antioxidants without risk of a slower GPX being a problem. So it would be better to have the CT GPX than to have the CC SOD2 and a TT GPX.
And Colleen is saying, I can't figure out what my AG means for my COMT. So all that means is that it works at a moderate rate, a moderate clearance. So if you have the GG being fast, the AA being slow, AG is right in the middle. So it's just that intermediate activity, which results in moderate breakdown of like dopamine, catecholamines. So it puts you like in that between, the so-called worrier, people who are slow to clear, or warriors, people who are fast to clear, those phenotypes. All right. And let's see. Joe has a question. She said she had her vitamin D checked recently and it was high. Now, that's something I would ask, like, what is high to you? Because the range on the reference range in the blood test is 30 to 100 nanograms per milliliter. Functionally, optimally, I like to see them more between 70 and 100. but what is high exactly? I mean, obviously, if it's well over 100, yeah, that's high. Um, but so yes, that's my SS of my 5-HT for paying attention to detail. Um, so she said she's on the estrogen patch, progesterone, just started testosterone. She stopped taking vitamin D, but she was kind of wondering, can uh, taking hormone replacement therapy influence vitamin D levels?
Hmm,
We're going to generalize the question a little bit.
that's an interesting question. Um, I would say not directly, but that the body is an ecosystem where many things are connected. But I would not say that starting to take hormone replacement therapy has been shown um, to automatically increase anyone's vitamin D levels. Dr. Varden, do you have anything to add?
Um, I mean, seeing that vitamin D, hormone D, influences uh, the sex hormones. I mean, hormone therapies, they can influence vitamin D metabolism, but I wouldn't say that they would be a direct indicator, like you said, of high vitamin D levels. I mean, estrogen therapy can increase calcium absorption. It may mildly raise active vitamin D levels, but that's the 125 dihydroxy vitamin D. Um, but no, I don't. I've
And
never
it,
heard it raising the 25 hydroxy D.
yeah, it wouldn't be a direct thing. It's influence on the gut microbiome, on calcium D-glucarate levels, all of those things, but it not in a one-on-one correlation, I would say.
Yeah. I
Um,
would probably investigate some other things, or, again, you can always, adjust. I know I adjust my vitamin D supplementation based on the time of year where I live, the latitude at which I live. It's dark at like 4:30. It's like I don't get to see sun very often. I don't have that exposure. So I know during the winter months, I increase my vitamin D. During the summer, I lower it. So, but again, keep an eye on your levels and then just adjust accordingly. So, interesting. She said, yeah, her D3 went higher after HRT. Yeah, I mean, it could. Again, I think that there's some aspects to it, but a direct causation, you know, I don't know of any research that says. And you know what? I think we have come to our end.
we have in fact gone a little over. We
I
apologize.
know, a couple
Um,
minutes.
it's just so much fun that sometimes we can't stop. So thank you, Dr. Varden. And thank you to our audience for all of your questions and participation. You've been wonderful. And Dr. Varden, I can't wait to do this again whenever the next time is.
Absolutely. I really enjoy this. And thank you so much, everyone, for sticking around, for learning. We hope you are walking away with some pearls of wisdom, action items, and the information that you requested that you wanted to walk away with by being here at this webinar with us. So thank you. Have a wonderful night and have a great day. I will see you tomorrow.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.